Nagy Istvan. Born February 22, 1904 in Kolosvar, Transylvania. Novelist, short story writer, essayist. Father, a factory worker, killed on front in World War I, mother lost arm in industrial accident. Forced by poor financial circumstances to leave elementary school in 5th form. Became cabinet maker, tramped through Romania and Balkans. Educated himself in various trades and with help of Communist Party seminars. Served as president of Munkaseglyegylet. Helped to found Korank in Kolosvar in 1926, which published works of Attila Joseph, Gyola Ilis, Aaron Tomasi, Lehos Kasik, and János Katalanyi, QQV. Imprisoned a year for participation in railroad strike in 1933. Became provincial secretary of Vorosigli in Kolosvar 1934 to 1935 and then member of its Bucharest office. Imprisoned for these activities 1935 to 1936. After release became member of Transylvanian and Banat Committee of Communist Party until 1938. Awarded Erdési Zbmivse Prize for Ozenvazilat in 1936. By this time he was looked upon as a pioneer of realism in Hungarian literature in Transylvania. Persecuted during World War II. Returned to Transylvania from Romanian internment camp in fall of 1940. Increased activity in Communist Party and linked himself with workers' writers, as he had previously associated himself with populist writers through Kalatnip, Magyarország, and Szabadso. Also contributed to Nepszava. Editor of Világosság and then of Igazság 1944 to 1946. Member of Kolosvar Committee of Romanian Workers' Party in 1945. Became professor and university rector. Parliamentary representative 1948 to 1952. Named associate member of Romanian Academy of Sciences in 1954. Managing editor of Nyelvs Irodalom Tudományos Lemanic in Kolosvar. Awarded Romanian National Prize for revised edition of Aleg Magaszab Hofikan in 1955. Romanian delegate to UNESCO Conference in India in 1956. Member of Nagy Nemzetgyűlés Elnökség 1957 to 1961 and its representative since 1961. At present a member of Central Board of Romanian Writers Federation. Realistic writer dealing with problems of proletariat. Novels and short stories generally considered to be best. Studies also important, especially his sociographic sketches. Aleg Magaszab Hofikan and Rezmihali ek Kostolaha have been translated into Romanian, Azamsidsag Nebben into Romanian and Serbian, and some of his short stories into Bulgarian, German, Polish, Romanian, and Russian. Nagy Lehos. Born February 5, 1883 in Apostagtabanyitelik, died October 28, 1954 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, publicist. Illegitimate child, mother Julia Nagy, once servant in Pest, earned living by taking in boarders. Raised by maternal grandparents until 6. Then lived in Budapest with mother and completed schooling. Began study of law but did not obtain degree. Worked in various law offices and served as district administrator in Aboy Santo for time in 1906. Beginning in 1904 served frequently as tutor to Jankovic-Basin family. From 1912 on generally lived on earnings from writings. Neurasthenic condition exempted him from military service in World War I. Edited Belundistok in 1918 and then Borz Semyanko. Publicist writings supported revolutionary government of 1918 to 1919, and he served as literary advisor to Zalemi Termikek Orzagos Tanaxa. No action taken against him after failure of revolutionary government, but unrepentant attitude made it difficult for him to obtain positions. Major contributor to Nyugat beginning in 1922 and editor of its Arcadia column for a time. Opposed resurgent nationalism and anti-Semitism in early 1920s. In mid-1920s he strengthened relations with such communists as Sandor Gurgly, Laszlo Garablys, and Aladar Thomas. Became acquainted with Attila Joseph, QV, who looked upon Nagy as fatherly friend throughout life. His writings began to appear increasingly in 100% and Forus. Edited Ejayat 1927-1928. Married Boris Zagidi in 1932. Awarded Baumgarten Prize in 1932, 1935, and 1938. Attended Writers' Conference in Moscow with Gyula Illis, QV, in 1934. Affiliated himself with populist writers in 1935 for a time. 3 numbers of his periodical, Nagy Lehoskulan Velimeni, appeared in 1939. During World War II he opened a small bookstore, worked on autobiography, and contributed to Magyar Szalag. After 1945 he joined Communist Party and contributed to numerous periodicals, including Szabad Nép. Went to Switzerland for health in 1947. Awarded Kossuth Prize in 1948. Numerous works published, but neglected during last years of life. One of the most important writers of prose fiction between 2 world wars. Now being viewed mainly as realistic writer with socialistic outlook who has influenced authors of generation after 1945. Used Freudianism in writings for a time. Effective satirist. Some of his short stories have been translated into Bulgarian, English, French, German, Polish, Romanian, and Serbian. Nemeth Laszlo. Born April 18, 1901 in Nagy. Novelist, dramatist, essayist. Father a geography and history teacher. Family lived in Szolnok briefly, then moved to Budapest. Attended Budapest schools and began to write short stories and poetry. Studied philosophy at University of Budapest for half-year beginning in fall of 1919, then entered medical school, obtaining degree in 1923, also training in dentistry. Practiced dentistry for a time and then became school physician, which he remained until 1942. Awarded Nyugat Prize for Horvathny Megal, a short story, in 1925. Other writings appeared in Nyugat, Napkalit, and Protestants Zemel. Visited Paris. Radical views separated him from conservative connections. He quarreled with Mihaly Babits, QV, in 1932 and broke relationship with Nyugat. In 1932 he founded Tunu, which he wrote entirely himself until it ceased in 1936. Through Tunu became ideologue of populist writers. Director of Literary Section of Radio for short time 1934 to 1935. Writings appeared in Velaz, Kalatnip, Tukar, Hid, and Magyar Szalag. Private tutor in school in Hodenszóvásárhely 1945 to 1950. Silent for political reasons 1949 to 1953, period in which he turned to translating. Since 1950 has lived on earnings from writings. Received Attila Joseph Prize for translations of Tolstoy and Zakrotikin in 1952. Original works began to appear again in 1954. Supported socialism in 1956 revolution. Awarded Kossuth Prize for Ijitoester and Galilei in 1957. Visited Soviet Union in 1959. One of the most important prose writers in 20th century Hungarian literature. Began as writer of studies and treatises, then turned to novels and plays. Independent populist writer. Novels are strongly realistic and use techniques of West European realistic novel. Plays generally influenced by Ibsen, strongly intellectual. Social dramas influenced development of drama between 2 world wars. Subject matter that of peasant and village life. Much psychological analysis of crises forced on individual by society. Especially noted for sensitive treatment of problems of women. His translations are also important: Gontsarav, Gorky, Ibsen, Gierezek, Kleist, Lessing, Pushkin, Shakespeare, A. Tolstoy, L. Tolstoy, Wilder, and Zakrutikhin. A Minoseg Foradalma has been translated into German, Bun Angus into Czech, Ijitoester into Bulgarian, French, German, and Serbian, Galilei into Russian, Izoni into Czech, Finnish, French, German, Norwegian, Serbian, and Spanish, Koksik Septemberban into Italian, and some of his short stories into English, French, and German. Neurojoseph. Born July 18, 1889 in Zaklisomber, died October 16, 1953 in Madrid. Novelist and short story writer. Completed schooling at Catholic Gymnasium in Zakliadvarhely, Catholic Seminary in Gyolafa and Pasmanium in Vienna. Ordained in 1912. Taught theology in Nagy Siban and became a priest in Kid, Kolas County, in 1915. Left priesthood in 1919 and married. For a time he earned a living by operating his own grist mill. Following success from publication of his short stories in periodicals, he became staff member of Kaliti Ajasag in Kolosvar at end of 1920. Worked for 10 years as journalist. Began to farm an inherited estate in Alsarakos in summer of 1931. Resumed journalistic activities, became editor of Kaliti Ajasag, its head in early 1940s. Served concurrently as parliamentary representative of Transylvania in Budapest and editor of Magyar Arrow in 1941. Served as member of parliament in Sopron. Fled to Germany in 1945, then settled in Spain, where he died of cancer. Novels and short stories were influenced by Expressionism. Stories were the first treatment of people living in Sikli area. His writings show people living in close relationship with nature, claiming the state to be source of human happiness. Strong in poetic feeling. Vivid descriptions of Transylvanian mountains. Isanagajaban has been translated into Dutch, Romanian, and Slovakian, Kopjafok into German, Azn Apam into Italian, Uzbens into Estonian, German, Italian, Slovakian, and Spanish, Havasok Konov into Czech, Dutch, German, Italian, and Spanish, and some of his short stories into English, French, German, Portuguese, and Romanian. Orchi Lorenc. Born August 9, 1718 in Tarnaires, died July 28, 1789 in Pest. Poet. Descendant of landed gentry. Entered army in 1741 and became noted for heroic exploits during 22-year military career. Participated in War of Austrian Succession, 7-Year War, and Ransom of Berlin. Retired to estate in Tarnaires in 1764. Named Lieutenant Governor of Abaoy County in 1764 and was Lord Lieutenant 1767 to 1784. Published János Iliai's translation of Boethius Meditations. Began writing poems early, stopped in 1765, and resumed in 1772 at urging of Gyorgy Besani Qv. Worked on establishing regulations for control of Felsodaza and other rivers 1774 to 1782 under royal appointment. Seldom left estate, did not visit Pest and Buda frequently until after 1772. Had a vast knowledge of world literature. Influenced by Horace, Boileau, and Voltaire. Most at home in French literature, especially the non-revolutionary concepts of Voltaire. Thought in poems touched by Rousseauistic return to nature for happiness. Indebted for verse techniques to Istvan Gyorgy, QV. Preferred Alexandrines. Basically opposed to ideals of period of the literary revival. Some of his poems have been translated into French and German. Pap Caroly. Born September 24, 1897 in Sopron, died January 1945 in Bergen-Belsen. Short story writer, novelist. Family name, Pollock. Father a literary historian and rabbi. Completed schooling in Sopron. Volunteered for army service in World War I. Welcomed Revolution of 1918 to 1919. Served in Vorose Hadsireg and became commander of city of Murakerester. Imprisoned in Zombadli for activities after fall of revolutionary government. Family broke relations with him. Emigrated to Vienna in 1923. On return to Hungary supported himself with occasional jobs, was traveling actor for a time, also clerk. Settled in Budapest in 1925. Began to write short stories at urging of Lehos Mikes and Erno Osvat, and gained first notice when he won Nyugat Prize in 1926. Writings appeared in Nyugat and AZ Est publications. Nominated for Baumgarten Prize in 1930 but name was removed from list because of his record as a revolutionary. Identified himself increasingly with Jewish people and their problems in 1930s. Silent during World War II, worked on Novel of Christ. Batsabo produced in 1940 and Moses, still not published, in 1944. Became inmate of forced labor camp, transported to Buchenwald as No. 72.713 on November 2, 1944. Circumstances of his death are not clear to date. Contributed to development of modern Hungarian prose fiction. His stories, often considered to be better than his novels, are tightly structured, poetic, simple in style. Writings are characterized by conflict between vision and reality, between longing for community and desire for solitude, and by fate and desires and beliefs of humanity. Themes relate to problems of Jewish people. Concerned with basic ethical questions. Some of his stories have been translated into English, French, German, Italian, and Portuguese. Pasmani Peter. Born October 4, 1570 in Nagyvarad, died March 19, 1637 in Pasana. Prose writer, Catholic prelate. Descendant of aristocratic Protestant family, became Catholic in 1582. Began studies in Kolosvar in 1585. Joined Jesuit order 2 years later. Served probationary years in Krakow and Vienna 1589 to 1592. Completed studies with philosophy faculty in Vienna and after studying theology was sent to Rome 1593 to 1597. Assigned to Graz in 1597, where he was superintendent for a year and then taught logic, ethics, and physical science for 3 years. Began to publish learned works in this period. Devoted nearly 10 years in Graz to attacks on Austrian Protestants, visited Hungary frequently during this time. Sent to Jesuit monastery in Vagsalit in 1601 to undertake analysis of Catholic doctrine. Returned to Graz in 1603 and taught theology for 3 years. Published Philalet, 1603, a reply to Istvan Magyari's book. While at Graz published a translation of De Imitatione Christi, 1604, and Kirestiini Imadsigos Konev, 1606. Returned to Hungary permanently in 1607. Joined the court of Ferenc Forgách, Bishop of Esztergom, in Nagyszombat in that year and became leader of the Hungarian Counter-Reformation. In 1609 he wrote Az Nagy Calvinus Janus Nak Hisakigiasani, a polemic treatise against Protestantism. In 1613 he published his major work, Isani Agase Gravezer Lo Kalas, an exposition of Catholic beliefs. Became Bishop of Esztergom on September 28, 1616. Efforts in the public interest continued to increase. Established Pasmanium, a seminary, in Vienna in 1622 and University of Nagyszombat in 1635. Named cardinal by Pope Urban VIII in 1629. Went to Rome in 1632 to seek support for King Ferdinand. Death caused by aging and overwork. Best prose writer of Hungarian Counter-Reformation, masterful in use of Baroque style. Writings show influence of European cultural and artistic developments. Use of language anticipated future strength of Hungarian literary prose. Some of his writings have been translated into French and Turkish. Pétele Istvan. Born September 13, 1852 in Marosvásárhely, Transylvania, died January 5, 1910 in Kolozsvár, Transylvania. Short story writer. Son of a shopkeeper and smallholder. Attended first 4 forms at Gymnasium in Marosvásárhely, next 3 in Kolozsvár, and last in Zakliadvárhely. Entered University of Budapest in 1872, completed philosophy studies in 1877. Returned to parents' home, where he spent 3 years gardening, reading, and sending manuscripts to editors of periodicals in Budapest and Kolozsvár. In 1880 he became journalist on Kelet in Kolozsvár and member of Petőfi Társaság. Returned for time to Marosvásárhely in 1881, partly because of heart ailment. Became assistant editor of Kolozsvári Közlóny in 1883, editor of Kolozsvár 1886-1891. In 1888 he founded Erdélyi Irodalmi Társaság and married Irma Korbuli. Served as president of Kaményi Zsigmond Társaság in Marosvásárhely. Withdrew to Marosvásárhely in 1891, unable to carry on editorial work because of nervous condition. Spent last days in psychiatric clinic in Kolozsvár. One of the best known and most respected short story writers at the end of the 19th century. Subject matter that of ordinary people and their everyday lives. Found tragedy in every daily event and believed in biological determinism. Style very realistic, viewpoint highly fatalistic. Particularly influenced by Russian writers, especially Turgenev. Some of his short stories have been translated into French, German, and Slovakian. Petőfi Sándor. Born January L. 1823 in Kiskoros, died July 31, 1849 in Székesfehérvár. Poet. Father a butcher. Family moved to Kiskunfelegyháza in October 1824. Schooling frequently interrupted. Studied in Kiskoros, Felegyháza, Kecskmét, Szabadzalas, and Sarzent Lorink, then in Pest at Evangelical and at Piarist Gymnasiums, and at Evangelical Gymnasium in Ezid, September 1, 1835, to June 30, 1838. Knew Greek, Latin, English, and French. Entered Evangelical Lyceum in Selmec on August 31, 1838. Father suffered economic difficulties and disowned him. Ran away from Selma Obanya on February 15, 1839 and began long period of wandering. Actor at National Theatre in Pest. Spent summer 1839 with relative in Ostfjällszóni. Joined army in September 1839 in Sopron. Served with regiment in Austria and Croatia. Discharged in February 1841 because of ill health. Rome till fall of 1841, visiting parents in Dunaveks and acting in traveling company for 3 months. In October 1841 entered gymnasium in Papa, where he met young Morjokai, QV, and completed 7th form. Poem of Borizo published in Athenaeum, May 22, 1842. Resumed wandering. Worked as actor in Kekskmet for a time. Obtained position as translator in 1843. In fall 1843 again became traveling actor, but illness forced him to stay in Debrecen. Moved to Pest where he successfully published an edition of his poems with help of Mihaly Vörösmarty, QV. Became assistant editor of Pesti Divatlap on July L. 1844. Resigned position in spring 1845 and lived on income from his writings. In April 1845 went on long tour of provinces, during which he met young Mihaly Tompa, QV. Spent summer, winter, and spring in Pest, Salczent Martin, and Godalo. Went to Transylvania with Karoly Oberniuk near end of August 1846. Met Julia Zendry in Nagy Karoly and married her on September 8, 1847. Began friendship with János Arany, QV, in June 1847 in Salontat. Established Tizek Tarsasaga with other young writers in 1846, among them Morjokai, Mihaly Tompa, and Karoly Oberniuk. His political activities attracted attention of Austrian spies. Active in stirring revolution in March 1848. Entered military service as captain in September 1848, serving in Debrecen October 22 to November 16, 1848. Angered by defeat of Hungarian forces. Moved to Transylvania and reported to Joseph Bame for military duty on January 25, 1849. Sent to Debrecen as messenger on February 8, 1849. Disagreed with military authorities and resigned commission. Returned to Bame in Transylvania and rejoined military. Became major and sent as messenger to Lajos Kossuth and Gyorgy Klapka, Minister of War. Quarreled with Klapka and again resigned. Went from Debrecen to Pest with family. Traveled to Mazobirany, Torda, and Murasvazarhely. Left Murasvazarhely on July 30, 1849 to rejoin Bame. Killed following day in clash between Hungarian and Russian forces in Sejszvar. Controversy about circumstances of death and place of burial continues. Poetry received quick and lasting attention. One of the greatest Hungarian poets. The importance of his poems to history of Hungarian literature is equivalent to that of a literary period. Adopted more realistic themes. Believed freedom was greatest part of human happiness. Poems deal with nature and people of Great Plains, with love of family life, of children for parents, and of husband for wife in personal and vivid manner. Extended range of Hungarian poetry on basis of highly active and varied imagination. Depth of Hungarian quality and expression of thought and emotion in character, life, and symbols of folk and peasants beyond those of any predecessor. Folk poetry especially noteworthy for use of native rhythms and introduction of people and mythology of the Great Plains in lyrical synthesis. Among his narrative poems, János Vitéz considered best for its blending of folk subject matter, outlook, and form. In prose fiction he also made significant contributions to development of Hungarian literature. Accounts of travels are models of genre. Attempted drama, but best known in this genre for translation of Shakespeare's Coriolanus. Editions of his poems are available in Albanian, Arabian, Armenian, Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, English, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Japanese, Kazakh, Kyrgyzian, Korean, Lithuanian, Moldavian, Mongolian, Persian, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Serbian, Slovakian, Spanish, Swedish, Turkmenian, Ukrainian, Vietnamese, and Volapük, and some of his poems have also been translated into Classical Greek, Modern Greek, Icelandic, Latin, Romansh, Malayan, Portuguese, and Turkish. Gyorgy. Born October 1, 1713 in Lutany, died August 6, 1792 in Pasil. Poet. Son of Pal Ronay, a writer and secretary to Ferenc Rákóczi II, QV. Went to Adira Frankfurt in 1732 to complete university studies and began to write poetry. Returned to Lutany in 1733 and pursued literary activities. Assembled large library, established relationships with most famous writers of the day, and encouraged their efforts. About 1,740 married Catalans and Peteri, who assisted him with library collection. Parliamentary representative of Pest County in 1764. Met Ferenc Kazinci, QV, in 1772 in Saraspataki Reformatus Collegium and formed a lasting friendship. Named Baron in 1782 by Joseph II, Count in 1790 by Leopold II. Counseled in publication of Magyar Museum and Orpheus. Did not fulfill all his plans to write, but is important for the first deliberate use of West European meters in Hungarian poetry, and those rhymed quantitative meters he used were known by his name, Rada Ver. In notes to his poems explored problems of poetic form and versification. Most of his poetry remained in manuscript and was lost. He was the first to see the importance of Miklós Zrínyi, QV. His library of approximately 100,000 volumes stood alone among private libraries in 18th century Hungary, is now housed in Reformatus Theologiae Academia, in Budapest. Some of his poems have been translated into English and German. Radnóti Miklós. Born May 5, 1909 in Budapest, died November 6-10, 1944 in Abda. Poet, translator. Mother died giving him birth. Orphan when 12. Raised by mother's younger brother. Poems first appeared in youth periodicals 1926 to 1927. Completed studies at business school in 1927. Studied textile manufacturing in Liberec, Czechoslovakia, 1927 to 1928. Clerk in private office 1928 to 1929. Also completed gymnasium in 1929. Entered University of Szeged in fall 1930 to study Hungarian and French. Became acquainted with Sándor Szék, QV, and affiliated himself with Szegedi Fiatalok Művészeti Collegiuma. Publication of Ujjmoti Pastorok Ennek in spring 1931 resulted in its confiscation and 8-day sentence, which was lifted upon appeal. Spent few weeks in Paris in summer 1931, where he formed relations with French Communist Party. On return to Hungary participated in the activities of illegal Hungarian Communist Party. Obtained doctorate in philosophy in 1934. Married Fanny Gyarmati in fall of same year. Participated in literary life of Budapest 1935-1936 and became acquainted with Attila József, QV. Obtained teaching certificate in fall 1936 but was unable to secure position. Earnings derived from occasional publications and tutoring, and received help from uncle. Contributed to Gondolate in 1936. Awarded grant by Baumgarten Foundation in 1937. Spent several weeks with wife in Paris in summer 1937. Visited France for few weeks in 1939. Served in forced labor camp in Transylvania in 1940. Participated in anti-fascist demonstration at Potofi statue in Budapest on March 15, 1942. Summoned for forced labor in May 1944 and sent to Bor, Yugoslavia, then sent to concentration camp in Hajdna, where he worked in copper mine and on road construction. Shot with 22 others near Gyorgy and buried in mass grave. Body, with last poems, was not recovered until 1947. Lyric poet who confronted his own life in relation to his tragic times. Poems show development through numerous modern poetic influences and political concepts. Achieved their distinctive characteristics during World War II when he was confronted by death. Viewed his own situation and experiences as symbol of the unhappy condition of humanity. Eclogues considered to be high point of his creativity. His translations, also important and an influence on his literary development, include the works of La Fontaine, Huizinga, Montherlant, Cervantes, and a collection of African Negro folk tales. Some of his poems have been translated into Bulgarian, Croatian, Czech, English, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Polish, Romanian, and Russian. Rákóczi Ferenc II. Born March 27, 1676 in Borsi, died April 8, 1735 in Rodesto, Turkey. Prose writer, prince, general. Son of Ferenc Rákóczi I, Prince of Transylvania, and Ilona Zrínyi. He was 4 months old when his father died. His mother moved to Munkacs, returned to Borsi in 1677, and returned again to Munkacs in 1680. She married Imre Thököly in 1682. The boy was in Vienna in 1688 and in school at a Jesuit monastery in Neuhaus, Bohemia in April of that year. Completed gymnasium studies in 1690 and was sent to the university in Prague. Arrived in Italy in spring 1693 for a year's stay, mostly in Rome. Married Amalia Saralta in 1694 in Cologne. Lived in castles in Saraspatak, Xerinx, Aperges, and elsewhere. In 1700, at urging of Louis XIV of France, began agitation for war against the Habsburgs. Was seized in 1701, but escaped to Poland. Entered Hungary on June 15, 1703, to lead War of Independence. Was named Prince of Transylvania in 1705. Directed military, political, and cultural activities during the war. Forced to emigrate in 1711, went first to Poland, where he hoped to obtain help from Russians, and then, in 1713, to France, where he lived at the court of Louis XIV until summer 1715, when he withdrew to a cloister in Gross-Bois. From 1717 on lived in exile in Turkey, in Zheniko, near Constantinople, 1718 to 1720, and in Rodesto 1720 to 1735. His remains, though located in Constantinople in 1886, were not returned to Hungary until 1906, for final interment in Kassa. His life work, mainly Baroque in style, is an intense blending of national political issues and Christian piety. The form of Confessions, written 17L6-1719, his major literary effort, is based on St. Augustine's Confessions and the Catholic Confessional. His memoirs, written 1717, recounts events of War of Independence from 1703 to 1711 in analytical and spare style suffused with strong feeling. Wrote many meditations 1718 to 1722. Poems also have been attributed to him. Remeniak Sandor. Born August 30, 1890 in Kolosvar, Transylvania, died October 24, 1941 in Kolosvar. Poet. Pseudonym, Vigvari. Son of a well-known architect whose bequest of his estate made possible comfortable life for son. Completed studies at Reformed Gymnasium in Kolosvar. Began law studies at University of Kolosvar but never completed them, partly because of nervous eye disease. Independent income enabled him to devote life to literary activity. Writings first appeared in Dobsona es Videk and then in Ellenzek, Kolos Veriherlap, and Az Ujay Sag. Poems first appeared in 1916 in Uj Doc. Contributed regularly to Erdei Zemel. A co-founder, later editor of Pastorches. Awarded Patofi Tarsasig Prize for Poetry in 1926. Important lyric poet in Romania between two world wars. Early poems dealt with injustices to Hungarians living in Romania. Sought to infuse religious and humanistic ideals through his poems and to show joys and sufferings and moral struggles of humanity. Subject matter that of nature, everyday happenings, and simple human acts. Later poems concerned with social questions, including criticisms of dominant social classes. Some of his poems have been translated into Czech, English, French, German, Italian, Polish, Romanian, Slovakian and Swedish. Remaniak Zsigmond. Born July 19, 1900 in Dortmund, died December 30, 1962 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer. Descendant of middle landowning family. Completed gymnasium studies in Eger. Entered law academy in Nagyvarad, interrupted studies after year, and completed them in Budapest. Turned attention to literary career early and, in preparation for it, began extensive world travels before completing university education. Lived in South America 1920 to 1927 working as cabaret pianist, smuggler, and clothing outfitter. First two works were published in this period, La Tentación de los Asesinos, Chile, 1922, and Las Tres Tragedias del Lampero Hallucinado, Peru, 1924. On return to Hungary he entered literary life. Writings first appeared in Hungary in Ahet, Ma, and Nyugat. With Aladar Thomas and Sandor Bortnyuk he founded Uj Fold, 1927, which published works of communist writers and ceased after 3 numbers. Prosecuted for anti-religious ideas contained in Balha Circus in 1932. Became contributor and member of editorial staff of Zepzo. Associated himself with populist writers. Corresponded with Zoltán Fabry, QV, for many years. Lived in United States 1939 to 1941. Returned to Hungary exhibiting more conservative tendencies 1941 to 1944. 18 works were published after 1945. 8 Gyorgy has staged in 1943 and Kardies Kaka in 1955, the latter also produced as film. Novels draw extensively on vast number of experiences obtained in travels. Picaresque in form. Broke new ground in Hungarian novel by experimenting with its techniques. Free and uncontrolled in organization. Critical of ruling social classes. Strongly critical of inhumanity of capitalism. Historical and philosophical viewpoints influenced by Spinoza and Bernard Shaw. Ravitsky Gyola. Born April 9, 1855 in Vitkoke, died July 11, 1889 in Budapest. Poet, essayist. Illegitimate child of Slovak maid and Hungarian aristocrat. Attended Catholic gymnasium in Pozsony in 1873. Father's death left family in poor financial circumstances. Tried unsuccessfully to meet schooling expenses by tutoring. Taught himself French and read German poetry and philosophy enthusiastically. His study of Berzsenyi, some translations and poems appeared in Erdely in 1873. Moved to Budapest in 1874 to make poetry known. Obtained position in publishing office of Figiello but quarreled with editors and went to Denta in fall 1875, where he fell in love with Emma Bakalovic, who inspired his best love poems. Love Unrequited, moved to Budapest in fall 1877, where inability to earn living by writing made him dependent on friends. In 1878 became member of Petofi Tarsasig and editor on staff of HUN. Dismissed from HUN by Morjokai, QV, in 1882, when it merged with Eliner to become Nemzet. Poor critical reception given first edition of Poems, 1883. Left Budapest and edited Aradi Hurlap in Arad, 1884, and Pannonia in Kassa, 1885. Returned to Budapest in December 1885, but circumstances failed to improve. Assumed responsibility for literary and theatre section in Pesti Hurlap in 1887. Began close friendship with Mari Jasai in 1888. Sent by friends to shores of Adriatic to seek cure for tuberculosis. Nomination for membership in Kisfaluti Tarsasig by Lajos Tolnay, QV, was rejected. Died in Medical Division of University of Budapest. First to give genuine expression to urbane spirit in Hungarian poetry, in deliberate opposition to peasant tradition in Hungarian literature. His subject matter that of everyday situations and occurrences and social outcasts. Strong sense of form and depth of emotion. Poems characterized by brooding over past, complaints about deceptions of life, and painful resignation. His lyric poems have pessimistic tone. Much influenced by Schopenhauer. Some of his poems have been translated into Bulgarian, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Slovakian, and Swedish. Ronay János. Born 1573, in Alsace-Trigova, died December 9–11, 1631 in Divany. Poet, diplomat. Descendant of evangelical aristocratic family. Precocity led to unbroken friendship with the much older Balint Balassi, QV, who believed Rimai's poetry would be superior to his own. Attended universities in Graz and Vienna and had basic and wide-ranging knowledge. Corresponded with Justus Lipsius, was a member of the court of Istvan Bathory about 1587 in Transylvania, that of Zsigmond Bathory in 1594. In diplomatic service of Istvan Bocskai beginning in 1605, of Gabor Bethlen, Prince of Transylvania, in 1609, and of King Matthias II for a time. Envoy to Turkey in 1608, to Pasha in Budapest in 1609, and to Turkey again in 1619. Married Orsolia Aki when he was 43. Settled on estate in Alsace-Trigova in 1620 and corresponded with leading public figures of the day, including Gyorgy Rákóczi and Peter Pázmány, QV. His home became a center of intellectual life, and he was looked upon as the chief figure in Hungarian literature. Participated in Hungarian-Turkish peace discussions in 1627 at Zoni. Next to Balint Balassi, he is the best lyric poet of the 17th century in Hungary. His poems are considered the classic example of late Renaissance and euphuistic style in the history of Hungarian poetry. He was prolific, but a significant number of his poems are lost. A large number of his love poems have been mistakenly ascribed to Balassi. Some of his poems have been translated into French and German. Ronay Gyorgy. Born October 8, 1913 in Budapest. Poet, novelist, critic, translator. Name also spelled Rana. Completed gymnasium studies in Godalo. Obtained teaching certificate in Hungarian and French from University of Budapest. Writings most frequently published first in Nyugat, Magyarország, Vigilia and Izustkar, and then in Magyarok, Quarters, Elit es Erodilum, and Nagy Vilag. Literary advisor to Rive Brothers Literary Institute Corporation 1937–1947. Edited as Ustker in 1943 and Vigilia 1950–1960. Now critic on staff of Vigilia. Member of the so-called third generation of Nyugat school. His poems and prose represent Catholic views of modern writers. Poems strongly psychological and intellectual. Criticisms and literary studies important. Translated numerous authors, among them Michelangelo, Apollinaire, Claudel, Jams, La Fontaine, Ronsard, Novalis, Holderlin, Rilke, Aragon, France, Gauguin, Goethe, F. Kafka, Malraux, Montesquieu, Pignol, Sartre, Simenon, Stendhal, Supervielle, Turgenev, and Virginia Woolf. Some of his poems have been translated into German and Italian.